of mission-driven programs with a focus on sustainable transportation and land use. The floor is yours.
All right, well, thank you, Brett. Just to check that you can see my shared screen and hear me.
We can.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, Brett and the whole team at Northwestern for inviting me to speak today. And it's great to share the panel with my colleagues, Chuck, Eric, Andrew, and Ed. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about integrating advanced air mobility into communities. And I'm going to start out by telling you about CAMI, the Community Air Mobility Initiative. We're a nonprofit educational organization dedicated to the responsible integration of advanced air mobility into communities by providing education, communication, and collaboration. We were formed about 2.5 years ago. My co-founder, Anna Dietrich, and I saw the need for an organization that was focused at that local level. There are a lot of great organizations working at the federal level, but there was no organization working with states, with cities, with regions, with counties, with tribes around the implementation of advanced air mobility. And we saw the need to bridge those local communities where this technology would be implemented with industry and with the regulators to bring all the stakeholders to the table. And so that is what we do. We educate and equip those local decision makers, planners, and the public, giving them the information they need to set policies and design infrastructure and systems to successfully integrate aviation into daily transportation options. So I want to start with a definition of advanced air mobility. We get lots of terms in this industry tossed around, lots of definitions, and this goes with a hat tip to our knowledge partner, UC Berkeley's Transportation Sustainability Research Center, and one of the articles they published. So advanced air mobility is a broad concept focused on emerging aviation markets and use cases for on-demand and scheduled aviation in urban, suburban, and rural communities. AAM includes local use cases of around a 50-mile radius in rural or urban areas, and also interregional use cases of up to a few hundred miles, either within or between urban and rural areas. So at CAMI, we really look at advanced air mobility in a broad sense. And from a conceptual perspective, not necessarily from a vehicle perspective. And I know Eric talked about this, Andrew did as well. I'm going to talk about that time frame as well. So it's been shown through history that people are willing to spend about 60 minutes a day for their commute. If you do more than that, you get the title of supercommuter. That number is called Marchettis Constant. And what we have seen is that while we don't believe that advanced air mobility will appreciably reduce traffic congestion overall, what we do see is that it will increase the distance that people can commute within that 60-minute time frame. So you can see when people traveled on foot or by carriage in a 60-minute daily commute, you didn't get that far. But as technology has improved, what we do is we extend the distance we can travel. So what does that mean? It provides more flexibility in housing locations. It reduces the number of those supercommuters. And because advanced air mobility isn't constrained by geography the way ground transportation is, it can provide increased travel options that open up transportation deserts and reduce the burden on existing infrastructure. It can also increase the efficiency of regional and local cargo delivery. However, it's important to remember that this new industry to date has been a technology push. So technologies that you've heard about, such as the electrification of propulsion, distributed propulsion, autonomy, and data networks have helped create this opportunity. Now what we're looking at is to create that market demand. So this market or this technology did not arise out of an expressed market need. So we don't have that market pull. What we have is the technology push. And so in order to develop and implement advanced air mobility, we really need to understand the market demand for this technology for both passengers and cargo. And doing that also means another piece of this puzzle is that we need to understand that this is the convergence of two historically distinct disciplines. Aviation as a form of transportation has not historically intimately integrated with other forms of transportation, not from an operational perspective, not from a regulatory perspective, not from a physical infrastructure perspective. So aviation lives in the realm of federal government and port authorities, excuse me. It has its own set of carriers and manufacturers and suppliers. On the other hand, local communities are very much engaged in transportation planning and urban planning. And the members of that community include elected officials, planners, agencies, public transit, businesses, and of course the residents, including disadvantaged communities. So we are bringing these two communities together or disciplines together when we talk about advanced air mobility. And we need to remember that this is a new working relationship. Again, I want to give a nod out to Adam Cohen, who I believe is in the audience, and his team at UC Berkeley for this graphic. So when we look at the built environment that we're working with, we need to remember that one size does not fit all. Communities are unique with different demographics, economies, geographies, resources, and existing transportation systems. And individual communities are often part of a larger metropolitan planning region with its own unique transportation infrastructure, patterns, and needs. So a transportation infrastructure system may need to work with different requirements of an urban core, of suburban residential areas, of edge cities, and rural areas. And all of those are going to inform what the transportation system needs to do and how advanced air mobility may fit into that. So I want to take a moment to look at some of the applications for advanced air mobility from a vehicle agnostic perspective. Just look at how we could use this new technology within our communities. One of the good first applications for advanced air mobility that has a clear public benefit is emergency services. So this is everything from disaster response to aeromedical, from firefighting to law enforcement. Some of these, of course, are event dependent. Others are, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, ongoing needs. Another form of use case for advanced air mobility is the air taxi, and you've heard both Joby and Archer talk about this. So this is really that on-demand point-to-point application. Again, as you heard both of them talk about, it's really important when we look at these applications that we need to look at these from the point of view of the traveler who wants to go from point A to point B, and that air taxi piece of it may be one mode in that travel, but we need to have a complete trip that makes sure to cover first mile, last mile, all of the pieces that traveler needs to get from A to B. Another application is to use this technology in what we call an air metro type use case. So this is flying a specified route on a specified frequency with or without exact scheduled times. So think of this as a bus route in the air. So there's an opportunity here to serve transportation deserts, to serve communities and areas that have a hard time getting regular transit service or light rail service because they're too small, they're too far out to provide a service that runs frequently enough to make it appealing. So Air Metro is another format that we can use this technology for. And finally, MicroHall airline operations. So we see these already, for instance, with Cape Air out of the Boston area. So these are scheduled air carrier flights with set routes and times, but shorter distances. So they have the ability to serve regional air mobility and hub airport access. And also importantly, they have the potential to increase the utility of smaller nearby airports and to distribute passengers. Our country in the US has 5,000 airports, and we only use about 10% of those. So we already have a lot of existing infrastructure that could be incorporated into a transportation network with this new technology if we look at existing small airports. So when we think about the impacts of advanced air mobility on communities, we need to remember that it will impact communities, both positively and negatively. So we need to make sure that the public benefits are felt broadly and are felt early on. And we need to understand what the adverse impacts are. We need to limit them, and we need to be transparent about them. And we need to assess advanced air mobility in the context of the priorities of that community. So in looking at some of the potential positive aspects of advanced air mobility, we have this opportunity to connect affordable housing with jobs and services. So when you think about some of these outerlying communities where affordable housing tends to be located rather than the expensive urban core, this is an opportunity to provide those communities with a way to get to that urban core for jobs, for education, for medical appointments, etc. We can certainly reduce emergency response times. We can just generally create a stronger connection of rural areas to urban opportunities. Andrew and I think Eric also mentioned the opportunities for workforce development and economic opportunities. And as I mentioned, that increased utility of general aviation airport infrastructure. On the other side, there are some negative impacts that we also need to consider. We've heard a little bit about noise and visual pollution, or noise pollution at least, and these aircraft are quieter. But we probably still need to understand more about how to plan for routes so that the noise and the visual pollution that's created more easily blends into the environment where it's traveling, and importantly doesn't affect certain demographics disproportionately. We need to understand the demands that this will have on local grid capacity and how limited grid capacity will be handled with. What are the policies we need to have in place to make those decisions. One potential negative impact that we need to be mindful of is a negative impact on existing public transit. So in some places, public transportation or light rail, for instance, can be overburdened. In other places, it maybe has light ridership or an average ridership, but is an important form of transportation for lower income demographics. And what often happens when you pull people off of a public transportation system is that service levels drop. So we need to be careful that we don't, again, disproportionately affect certain demographics as we as we build out this system. We have a potential for sprawl and gentrification. We certainly saw that in the 50s with the rollout of a federal highway system. Again, these are things that we need to be mindful of. And in our work, we hear time and again, local decision makers know that they have limited resources and they have to make decisions for how to use their funds to reflect the priorities of their community when those funds may be limited and there may be competition for other critical infrastructure. I mentioned multimodal integration briefly, and you've heard that from others. It is critically important that advanced air mobility is integrated into this multimodal system. And again, this is not a place that aviation has really existed before, but in order to be part of a regional or urban transportation system, we need to have this form of transportation integrate with the other forms of transportation. And that starts with developing multimodal mobility hubs. So getting people in a place where they can take the aircraft, but they can also get home either through walking or access to micromobility or other forms of ground transportation. So co-locating those modes in order to create an effective and efficient system. At CAMI, we look at the question of public acceptance in this virtuous cycle diagram. So we start with trust, and we've heard a lot from both Joby and Archer and other OEMs about the importance of safe vehicles, safe infrastructure, and secure operations. And that certainly is where trust begins. The next piece of that is that public benefit piece. We need to make sure that this is a form of transportation that has broad public benefit. I like to give the example, I live on an island in the Pacific Northwest, and we have, at our fire station, we have a medevac helicopter pad. And when those helicopters take off with a patient to go into Seattle to the trauma center, they fly right over my head. And I'm not someone who's horribly bothered by aviation noise, but I can hear those aircraft loudly, but I know why they're there. And they're performing a public service. And so that noise doesn't bother me. If it were a neighbor flying over to his office or his second property in Seattle, I might have a different feeling about that. There's a lot that goes into public perception that goes beyond, for instance, decibel level. And that's understanding the public benefit of a service is really important to gaining public acceptance and to gaining the support of local decision makers and planners. So again, making sure that whatever the adverse impacts are, that we limit them, that they're not outweighing that public benefit, and ensuring that we integrate with existing transportation multimodal systems. So the starting point for all of that is to take a systems master planning approach and to look at this opportunity in the larger context of the metro. Yes.
If I can interrupt, I just want to ask if you can use this as your one wrap-up slide so we can get to a few questions.
Absolutely.
We only have until 4. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to see if we can get to at least a little bit of a group discussion as well.
Yes. I think these slides will be available, so I won't talk through this, but my point here is that we need to look at this in the larger context of a metropolitan transportation system, looking at all the resources, all the needs. I'll leave my concluding thoughts to the questions, but I will let people know we have a lot of resources on our website, communityairmobility.org, that we've produced. We with UC Berkeley will be writing a 50-page planning guide for advanced air mobility for the American Planning Association over the next year. And I would direct people to our Urban Air Policy Collaborative Cohort Program. This is a program we have for state and local agency staff. It's a 9-week curriculum, or 9-session curriculum that goes 2 hours every week for 9 weeks to do a real deep dive into understanding what advanced air mobility looks like from the perspective of a community. And with that, I will wrap it up.
Thank you,